Greetings everyone and welcome back. Since this spring was so bad for sailing, I'm taking advantage of every opportunity I can to go sailing this summer. I've been enjoying some wonderful evening sails when I can get them in. Some cruises with my family, including my Coast Guard Academy cadet who was home for a little while. Gotta soak up those opportunities while you can. As much as I hate to see it come and end, you can just feel summer starting to stretch and yawn a bit. Lots of good days out there still to sail, but I've already made some exciting plans for this fall. I'll go into more detail at the end of the video, but in a nutshell, the Salvation Navy is going on a road trip for a couple of future episodes to help out a good cause. I'll be working and sailing on a magnificent schooner in the Chesapeake Bay. Lots more exciting details about that later in the video, but for now let's get into some of the boat projects for my cat boat. One of the design features of a Harris-Off America is an open area under the bench seats. The Harris-Off Eagle has a design that encloses these areas, and I like that idea. It helps conceal the gas tanks, the batteries, stowage, etc. So I decided to make some Lazarette covers for the America. For the rails and stiles of the hatch cover, I used a beautiful piece of solid oak I got out of a house several years ago that was being demolished. I really hate to see good wood end up in a landfill. And this wood and others in my collection are decades and in some cases well over 100 years old. You just can't find wood like this anymore. And it bothers me that we are going through wood like this faster than it can be replenished. We need to be responsible with these resources. So if you need some good quality wood, check out places that are demolishing houses, reuse places. Even Facebook's marketplace has people getting rid of wood for cheap or even free. The first step was to mill down the rails and stiles and start to fit them to the tapered cockpit sole, getting all the angles I needed to fit it in. As I want to add a grate to the bottom of the cockpit sole someday, I made accommodations for that as well. Once I get the pieces cut, the next step was to join the rails and the stiles. I chose to use biscuit joinery and epoxy to glue it up. A couple notes about Total Boat's epoxy kits. As I've mentioned before, one of the reasons I like this product is it comes with the pumps, which the West Systems kit doesn't, and it's at a better price point. It also works great for laying up fiberglass as well as glue. When you get the pumps, there are simple yet detailed instructions on how to configure the pumps. Because I'm using the gallon container of resin, the resin pump extension just fits on right at the bottom and doesn't need to be trimmed. This is a 5:1 epoxy, so I'll need to cut the pump extension down for the Group Size B hardener container. Instructions tell you exactly how long to cut the provided tube. Once cut, just fit it onto the pump and you're all set. The instructions then call for pumping a few times until the product comes out without any spits or air bubbles. It's always best to follow the manufacturer's instructions, but I have found another way that works for me and doesn't waste as much product. Once I give the pumps a couple of full presses to prime them, I can feel the product starting to stiffen the press. When that happens, I simply press the pumps down just a tiny little bit rather than a full pump, over and over until a little drop or two comes out. When it comes time for a full pump, I always get a clean, full measure of product without any air bubbles, and I don't lose any product. But that's just me. Following Total Boat's instructions is always going to work too. Once I get the proper proportions, I thoroughly mix it up for a couple of minutes and generously apply it to the newly cut slots, biscuits, and both sides of the joint. I don't like wasting any, but don't be stingy with this stuff either. Once the epoxy has been applied, I clamp it up and move on to the grate that fits inside the frame. These were also made from recycled poplar that was taken out of an over 150-year-old house before it was burned down by the fire department for practice. Get these treasures out of there before they're gone. Clamp them up and start sanding down the oak with 220. There's really no need to go beyond 220 grit sandpaper with wood. Finer grits than 220 are primarily for rubbing out finishes, but 220 is going to do about as much fine smoothing for wood as you're going to get. And this is where this old material really starts to shine. It's beautiful wood and it's going to look fantastic on the boat. Once the epoxy cured on the grate wood, it was time to cut them to size, use more epoxy to fit them into place, and more glorious sanding. Now it's time to apply the finish. Until now, I haven't been able to find a good, tough marine finish for exterior wood with UV protection. I talked to the folks at Total Boat and they recommended Halcyon to me. But first they recommended I use wood sealer after my final sanding. Now I've been doing woodworking for a while and never really understood why you'd want to use wood sealer. I mean, isn't that what the varnish or the other finish is supposed to do? But I decided to give it a try, followed their recommendations and applied the wood sealer, and in retrospect, I'm really glad I did. It made a much better surface for the final application. Since I had the grate to work with, I applied the first 2 coats of the sealer with a sprayer using Special Brushing Thinner 100 to thin it out for the sprayer. I used a ratio of about 2:1 for the first coat, then 1:1 for the second. I came back and applied another coat by brush. The Total Boat Wood Sealer is a 1-part gloss marine grade wood sealer that fills wood grain and seals the wood against moisture and UV damage, so there's another advantage to the UV protection I needed. It creates a self-leveling surface ideal for other finishes, and it doesn't need sanding between coats. It dries really fast and you can recoat it in just about 2 hours. It works on all types of bare woods including plywood, oily woods like teak and mahogany. Sanding the final wood sealer coat with some 500 grit sandpaper by hand, it was time to clean it up with some Total Boat Dewaxer and Surface Prep. This cleans off the surface well of any dust, wax, oil, or anything that might interfere with the Halcyon. This might be a bit of overkill, but I really wanted the finish to turn out well. Next, I applied the Halcyon with a good quality brush. Total Boat's instructions say you shouldn't need to thin it down, but being an aqueous product, if you need to thin it down, you can do so with water, which you also use for cleanup. I really appreciate that feature. Now, I have used aqueous finishes before and frankly been really disappointed, like my original cockpit sole finish I had to redo. So I was hoping Halcyon would really come through for me. After about 4 coats of Halcyon, I let it cure, and I installed the Lazarette covers, and I think they really came out nicely. Exactly what I wanted with the finish I wanted. And I can say after a season of being exposed to the weather and heavy use, Halcyon is tough as nails. After 4 months of being kicked, banged into, scraped up against, open, closed, exposed to the sun and rain, it looks like it's brand new. It's definitely the best thing I've ever used, and I have applied it to other areas and components of my boat, and none of them are showing any wear, scratching, UV, or water damage of any kind. This is certainly my new go-to product for marine and non-marine wood protection, hands down. I need to see how it works with teak, but Total Boat tells me they have a special product for that too, as I'm finding some deficiencies with Cetal on teak. That's a topic for an upcoming video. Really quick before I wrap it up, I need to tell you about the big road trip coming up. I'm going to be doing some videos for a new organization that is helping our military veterans heal from PTSD. Liberty Launch VSO, or Veteran Service Organization, is a creation of Cole, pictured here on the left, to use classic schooners to take out vets dealing with PTSD. Vets' time on board will help to build camaraderie among the vets and do things they did as a team in the military in a safe and peaceful environment. It's letting vets find fellowship again in what they were trained for and how they lived. He is also taking vets and their families out for excursions just to enjoy the peaceful joy of sailing on a magnificent schooner for some relief, R&R, and some time with family unplugged from the rigors of everyday life. Check him out on Facebook under Liberty Launch VSO or his website. I'll post links in the show notes below. While there, we're going to be doing some work on his schooner with some Total Boat products. Also do some interviews and capture stories, and covering the start line activities of the Great Chesapeake Schooner Race. That's going to be fun. This is really an exciting adventure, and I can't wait to get some footage to show you this amazing project and the beauty of these magnificent sailing ships. All with the great work they are doing for our vets. Thanks again to Total Boat for their sponsorship of the products we'll be using on Liberty Launch VSO schooners. Remember the discount code in the show notes below for the Salvation Navy viewers to save a few bucks on Jamestown distributors and Total Boat products for your next project. If you'd like to help out with some gas money for the road trip, I am on Patreon at the link in the show notes. I'm doing this out of my own pocket to help out Liberty Launch VSO, so any help is appreciated. Thanks for watching. I'll be back as soon as I can with another episode.